With the NGLCC. Thank you for joining us for Cybersecurity 1.0, the fundamentals of cybersecurity, presented by Silverback Cybersecurity, and you're going to be hearing from Jay Kimo.
Thank you, Cameron, and thank you to the NGLCC for allowing us this opportunity to present to your members. As Cameron said, I'm Jay Kimo. I'm the Chief Security and Technology Officer at Silverback Cybersecurity. My contact info is on here. This will be available to you as well, so that you will have the ability to contact me should you have any further questions that may or may not be addressed on the call today. We're going to go over Cybersecurity 1.0, the fundamentals of cybersecurity. And for the agenda, we're going to do a brief introduction. We're going to go over some terminology that's relevant in cybersecurity. We're going to go over cybersecurity concepts, and then we'll do some architecture principles and best practices. This is by no means a comprehensive aspect. This is a kind of a get your feet wet to cybersecurity and really start to understand the importance of it. So who are we? We're Silverback Cybersecurity. We do offer strategic information security consultant and managed services to our clients. And we try to help our customers understand, prioritize, manage cybersecurity, and prepare for cybersecurity. As we're starting to see in the industry, we see a lot more of this happening with constant breaches and hacks daily. So we've made it our only priority to help in the cybersecurity field. So I want to go over some cybersecurity terminology, and the reason I like to start off with terminology first is a lot of times most people won't understand the jargon that's going on in the cybersecurity world. So some of these may look familiar to you, some may not, but we'll go over them. The first one being an attack, and that's really an attempt to break into any computer system or mobile phone system, anything that may have information stored on it. The back door is a design fault that's either planned or accidental that allows the apparent strength of the design to be easily avoided by those who know the trick. A lot of times what happens in hacking is that the known backdoors published by software vendors are known to the hackers, and they use these because they either haven't been patched or they're open to being hacked, and it's a known vulnerability. Botnet, this is a collection of computers that are infected with small bits of code called bots that allow a remote computer to control some or all of the functions of the infected machines. The bot master who controls them has the ability to manipulate them individually or collectively as a bot army that act in concert. They're typically used for disreputable purposes such as denial of service attacks, click fraud, and spam. A lot of times it's easier to overtake a bunch of computers than trying to, buy them all, so they'll make it massive across whether it's a nation or around the world. We've had bot armies with computers in every country that have been able to do attacking. The click fraud, this one's an interesting one because it's an online crime that involves automating the act of clicking on a web link to perpetrate the fraud. In a classic click fraud scenario, a legitimate website decides to advertise on another site which hosts the ad. The website agrees to pay the ad hosting site a few cents each time a potential customer clicks on the ad, which links back to the legitimate site. Cheaters use automated tools to click the ad over and over, earning money for the legitimate site under false pretenses. We've also seen click ads be used. I had one customer who was hosting her website with a very well-known hosting company that the they ended up doing a hijacking, and we'll get into what a hijack is in a little bit, but they ended up making it so that the click ad, every time someone went to her website, went to the ad that was paying the fraudulent being. So for 2 weeks, her site was redirecting customers to a porn site. Not the best scenario, but ultimately we were able to detect and get everything fixed. It was a problem that she was unaware of until a customer had called her. Denial of service attack. This is an attack aimed at making the system or the network unusable, often by monopolizing system resources. We're seeing more and more of these in scale now, not only as hackers, but because of social or political consequences. Example was one of the biggest ones was in February 2000 when a hacker directed thousands of requests to eBay's website, literally closing eBay down. And it went on for a few hours. We also find a lot of young learning hackers that will try to do a DDoS attack on just a range of IP addresses that they may get. So this can have an impact on the small business market as well. A dictionary attack, this is an attack where somebody's trying to guess your password by systematically trying every word in the dictionary as the password. This attack is usually automated and using a dictionary of the hacker's choosing, which may include both ordinary words, jargon, names, and slang. An easy way to hack into Wi-Fi systems is by doing a dictionary attack, because most of the times the passwords are relatively simple. So they will use this to run an automated aspect to gain control of a Wi-Fi network. DNS spoofing, this is an attack technique where the hacker intercepts your system request to a DNS server in order to issue false responses as they came from the real DNS. So basically your DNS is tied to your website address. It tells people it's the mailing address basically of where your website lives. And they will spoof the DNS to route it to a malicious website and or a different website to allow the appearance that it's yours, but to put malicious code or other aspects of no good onto a suspected user who went to that website. Domain name hijacking is an attack technique where the attacker takes over a domain by first blocking access to the domain's DNS servers. So if you have these websites hosted outside of your network with providers, these are some of the types of stuff that you're going to want to check that are secured on your hosting sites. Evil Twin is a wireless access point masquerading as a trusted wireless network. Attackers use Evil Twin to trick unsuspecting users into connecting to their network. This is really common if you go to a Starbucks or an open Wi-Fi system. You really need to be assured that you're connecting to the right network. The Evil Twin is an easy one to start capturing all of the packets or information that's being submitted across that Wi-Fi network. Firewall is software or hardware components that restrict the access between a protected network and internet. Most of you are probably familiar with the term firewall. Some of the new terminologies are next-generation firewalls that add more services such as intrusion detection systems on top of that same device without having to put a second device in. The IDS is a networking product devoted to detecting attacks from hackers. Network-based intrusion detection systems, they examine the traffic on the network for signs of unauthorized access, as well as look at the processes running on the local machines. Phishing, this is an attack where the attacker tries to trick the victim into giving up sensitive information by masquerading as a trusted entity. Phishing attacks are usually done through email where they're trying to steal your credentials. We have ransomware. that is also used in the phishing attacks. What they try to do is get your computer to lock up so that you end up paying them a large amount of money. A social engineering attack is an attack that depends on the technology as much as on tricking or persuading an individual to divulge their information. These social engineering attacks are in the premise of somebody calling up and indicating that they're trying to, work on your desktop. They're from XYZ company that you have a contract with. And they try to indicate that it's them, or they forgot their password. Could you look it up for them? Those kinds of things. Spear phishing is really a type of targeted phishing attack where the attacker uses gathered details about the victim to increase the credibility of the attack message. So what they may do is they may go onto LinkedIn or onto your social media sites, garner information about you, and then really know personal things that make the attack more targeted. Virtual private network, this is a VPN. It's security benefits of a private dedicated lease line without actually owning one. It uses cryptography to scramble data so it's unreadable while traveling over the internet. Thus, it provides privacy over public lines. If you have branch offices, this is a inexpensive way to connect your branch offices to your host location with secure communication technology. Whaling is a type of spear phishing attack specifically targeted at high-ranking executives in an organization. They call it the whale. They want to go after the big guy who usually is not the most secure savvy because they're too busy with the other things, and it makes it an easier attack. And once you have the keys to the kingdom, you usually have most of the information you need. And then finally, a worm is a self-replicating program that seeks access into other computers, and what it's trying to do is look for flaws, and then it replicates and penetrates to other computers that are connected to each other. So on to cybersecurity concepts, and what is information security and cybersecurity? Information security is all businesses use information. For example, whether it's employee, tax, proprietary, or customer information, it's all vital to the operation of your business. And if it's compromised in some way, you may not be able to function. So protecting that information as you create, use, or store it is called information security. And what you're trying to do with information security is concentrate on how to protect the people, processes, and technologies that you use. And you do this within, three different, really, methods. Confidentiality, protecting it from unauthorized access or disclosure. For example, what would happen to your company if your customer information, such as usernames or passwords, or even credit card information, was stolen? You're trying to protect information in integrity, protecting it from being modified. So we would look at that as an integrity method. And then availability, preventing the disruption in how you access your information. So an example would be, what if you couldn't access your bank account or your accounts payable, accounts receivable, or your customers couldn't access you? So we look at that as an availability in the information security. As more and more of all this information has become digitized or digitally stored, processed, and communicated, cybersecurity has become the key component of information security. And cybersecurity means protecting the electronic devices and electronically stored information. So anything that is a electronic device or electronically connected kind of system that moves communication services or systems or anything that affects that availability, integrity, and confidentiality of the information, we would treat as cybersecurity. So why are small businesses targets? Well, it's really because you're not as secure as you think. And this slide is an aspect of looking at some of the key concepts that have happened in small businesses. In many businesses, small businesses in general are usually putting their resources, their people, technology, and budgets into trying to keep their businesses up and running and gaining new contracts, gaining new business. But what happens as a result, the cybersecurity kind of slips off. And consequently, hackers and cyber criminals are now successfully focusing more on the unwanted attention on less secure businesses. Part of that is because small businesses don't have the budgets of large corporations to put in all the cybersecurity resources. Your small business has money or information that can be valuable to a criminal, whether you believe it or not, or they could use a botnet to use you as an aspect on a larger compromised attack on a larger provider. So we're looking at this, and these profiles that we're seeing from small businesses, 50% of them saying that they think they're too small to be a hacker target is really a misconception, and we're getting more and more of this as we see it. It's important to note that criminals are not always after profit, though some will attack you out of revenge, whether it's firing or a bad experience, or just the thrill of causing havoc, or as we see in this changing political climates, you can be targets for social or political reasons. And it's really important to understand that we're starting to see a lot of that being caused. It's really the overall impacts, it's not just damage to your information or systems, but, there's regulatory fines that could be there or legal fees. You're going to lose revenue to decrease productivity. One of the bigger ones, an adverse reputation or loss of trust from potential customers, loss of business income. It is one of those areas that we see that has caused quite a demand in education for cybersecurity. And, in reality, when we look at just malware safeguards lacking, 61% don't use an antivirus on all their desktops, or 40% aren't using a security suite of some sort on their desktops. Small businesses often see information security as really too difficult, or that it requires too many resources to do. It is true that there is no easy one-time solution to information security. It takes time, it takes consideration, and it takes planning. And we're going to go over some of that in the upcoming slides. Hacking these days is not only out to capture just credit card numbers or financial gain. The political and social issues where there's a perceived injustice in the world, we're seeing more and more professional hackers, like those behind Anonymous, to really take matters into their own hands. They've gained access to the social platforms, credit cards, and personal information, and they share that with the general public. These are the kind of things that we're starting to see more and more, even in the small business industry. 72% of the known breaches in 2011 of the businesses were affected businesses with 100 employees or less. 72%, and that number's gone up as more and more small businesses have been created. We're starting to see there's really an aspect of a program that needs to be put in place to gain and garner and retain customer, employee, and business partners' loyalties. So where do you begin in this journey of cybersecurity and information security? And step one is really about identify. You have to identify the information your business stores and uses. It's really unreasonable to protect every piece of information your business uses against every possible threat, but it is important to identify that information as most valuable to your business or to others. The first step is really the most challenging one, but it is also the most important in understanding your risk. And what you want to do is start listing all the types of information your business stores or uses, define an information type in any useful way that makes sense to your business. You may want to have your employees make a list of all the information they use in their activities. List everything you can think of. Nothing is unnecessary. And you don't need to be really specific. For example, you may just keep customer names and email addresses, receipts for materials, your banking information, and then you're going to go through and determine the value of that information. You're going to go through all of those and kind of ask yourself some questions. What would happen to my business if this information was made public? It may be detrimental. It may be no big thing. And you want to understand that. Or what if the information was incorrect? Those kind of concepts and questions you want to start asking about each piece of information. What if I couldn't access it? And that's one of the other ones. And then you start to look at it from a value and cost perspective. So cost of revelation, that goes back to confidentiality that we listed on the previous slide. Cost to verify the information, the integrity. If somebody messed up your online AP, for example, that could have some drastic impact. Or cost of loss of access, that's the availability. And then there's other costs that we tie to that value, and that's really, lost work, fines, penalties, data breach notification if you're in states that have that mandated law, other legal costs, and then your reputation or public relations costs. And then lastly, the cost to really identify and repair where that breach may have come from. So in step one, really just take a look at the information you have, use on a day-to-day basis, identify it, apply it to the CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and then assign it a dollar value. Step two, document. Document, document, document. You want to develop an inventory. And you want to identify what technology comes in contact with that information you just listed from the previous slide. You're going to, include technology that stores it, accesses it, processes it, transmits it. It could be hardware, such as your computers, your mobile phones. It could be software applications. It could be your browser. It could be your email. It could be cloud services. If you're using Office 365 or you're using Facebook as a platform, or Shopify, or a lot of the other cloud services that are out there. You want to make sure that you include, make, model, serial numbers, other identifying information, just in case you have insurance purposes, and we'll talk about cyber insurance in a little bit. But you also want to make sure that you have notations of that. Every information type should at least have one hardware, software technology listed next to it. So as you did your information list from the previous slide, you're now going to assign how that information is utilized, and it'll either have a hardware, a software, or both assigned to it. And then the cloud technologies, where applicable, any protections you can put in place, do they have protections in their cloud services? A lot of these providers have very minimal, and it's shocking, but when you read how information is stored and shared, nobody has time to read their end-user license agreements or the little thing that you just say, check here, yes, I've read, and off we go. What happens is a lot of times buried in there is how that information is secured, stored, and transmitted or shared. So if you're using cloud services, it's something that we say you should review and see if it has an impact to your overall confidentiality, integrity, and availability. For the software, you also want to identify what machines it's loaded on and the owner of that technology, and that goes more to, should that owner be able to access certain information that you've classified. And that's evaluating the impact of the information that's the most appropriate for getting security controls needed to protect it. In step 3, you're really going to try to understand your risk. It's really knowing your threats, knowing your vulnerabilities, and knowing your assets. And, you know, the threat bubble's a big bubble, but we want to focus on that little piece of red pie there that is the sweet spot that pertains to you. If we try to protect all the threats and all the assets against all the vulnerabilities, 90% won't apply to you. So we're trying to focus into that little red slice of pie that's going to allow you to dial in your cybersecurity program to meet your needs. There is no one-size-fits-all in cybersecurity. You know, we all face threats and vulnerabilities. It's categories of threats that are, some are consistent across businesses, but, you know, some may be more specific to your industry, location, even your business itself. And you really need to review the threats and vulnerabilities that you may face and estimate the likelihood that it'll be affected by that vulnerability. This will help you get really specific strategies to protect against that threat and vulnerability. We can put hardware and software in to try protecting everything, but it's really 90% of the time a large waste of money if we're not focusing on the threat and vulnerability that we're trying to protect for that asset. Vulnerabilities found in software applications are the most common avenue of attack for hackers, and because there's a broad range of vulnerabilities possibly found within a network or system, you know, you may want to look at a vulnerability scan or analysis conducted at least once a year, whenever you make major changes to your computer's network. You know, depending on the actions performed and the size and nature of the business being assessed, but it really will give you an understanding of holes that may be in your system. There's other tests to simulate attacks that can be done, but in most small businesses, you know, usually just the vulnerability scans, whether that's of your personal website or internally on your own network, even on your home network, I recommend, because a lot of times the home systems are just not up to par with the protection mechanisms, and that's one of the errors of being in a very connected home anymore. Step 4, we're going to get into safeguarding the information, and we're going to identify first and control who has access to that information that we were trying to protect. So as you can start to see, we're basically creating a map of how that information lives, breathes, flows, and who can access it. And that's really what we're trying to do in the identification phase. You're going to include whether or not, key or it's administrative privileged or a password's required. You're going to want to review the list of accounts and what privileges those accounts have. I know in a lot of times in small business, even medium business, they'll set up an account that everybody has the same access and password. Unfortunately, not everybody probably has the same access rights. And so that's what we're trying to do in this. You want to know anyone who has access to your business, physical access as well. And this could be your cleaning crews, it could be your maintenance personnel. Do you have outsourced PC care that are coming in? Those kinds of concepts. So we're really trying to control and shore up the protection of access to that information that we garnered back in step 1. You're going to require individual user accounts for each employee. I know this can be troublesome, but even contractors that need access that have their own password, and we'll get into this in a little further because we want to be able to keep track of who's accessing what. And that will come further down should a breach ever occur. But it really makes it, if they don't have their own, it's hard to investigate data loss or manipulation. So if you can have that everybody has their own account, it's one of the better things to do. We're going to then, create some policies and procedures for information security. These are living, breathing documents that are accessible to the employees, but your employees need to understand that you take security seriously. And you want to have annual reviews of security policies. There's a breadth of them, samples online that can be used. You tailor them to your business needs. If you don't have an employee handbook or manual, and you have a shared document site of some sort, it's a good place to put these policies in there and just put a calendar reminder for once a year to send out an email for everybody to review the security policy and acknowledge it. This will help you out later down the road if you have HR issues, especially with cyber law. Make sure that they identify the information or resources that are important and describe how you expect those resources to be used and protected by the employees. Next, we're going to protect, and that's limiting access to data and information. It really comes down to what employees have, what access to what information to do their jobs. This even includes, executives and senior managers. The reason we do this is because it minimizes the risk of losing information. We do find some administrative personnel. We've walked in, done an assessment of a company, and everybody has access to everything. Not always the best scenarios. It comes down to the need to know. And does that person need to know and have access to that information? And that's what you're trying to do in this protection stage. You also want to, if you don't have them, try to put surge protectors or UPSs in to protect from power outages and short outs that could compromise or manipulate the data or cause you not to be able to get data back. The one area of protection that you can focus on the most that will go the furthest is patching your systems and applications regularly. Any operating system, firmware, or plug-in installed on the system is a means for an attack. So, only install the applications that you need to run your business and patch and update them regularly. Many software vendors provide patches and updates to their supported products, really to correct security concerns and improve functionality. And I know it's hard to understand when all 90 pieces of software on some machines need to be patched, but it is important that we do that. When you purchase a new computer, check for updates immediately, or when you're installing new software. We've walked into some where vendors are not required to provide security updates for products anymore, unsupported products. If you're running Microsoft XP, there are no new patches, and that operating system is known with a multitude of vulnerabilities. If you can assign a day each month to check for patches, we call it Patch Tuesday, Hack Wednesday. Why is that? Because on Tuesday, most vendors release their patches. On Wednesday, most businesses haven't patched their systems. So the hacks that were just made known because of the vulnerability that it was made to protect gives the hacker an edge, and he's able to go out and check on Wednesday who patched and who didn't. There are products out there that will do it automatically for you. It really depends on your needs and what you're running. If you can install and activate software and hardware firewalls on your networks, this is really a good way to block unwanted traffic or malicious communications from browsing to inappropriate websites, depending on the settings. If you can install it between the internal network and the internet, you're in good shape. And I want to make this point because I see this a lot with customers, is that the access point hardware that you may get, such as a Linksys Wi-Fi router, Netgear, most of the small Best Buy kind of aspect, as well as, the ISP providers, whether that's Comcast, AT&T, Verizon, Time Warner, their internet gateway appliances do not provide the necessary protection and should not be relied on solely as your means of protection. Those things aren't patched or updated in their security aspects all that often, and usually they are easily breakable. They don't do a lot of the firewall analysis that is necessary to thwart those things. So as you're looking at your information, you also want to take inventory of how that information flows and how your security protection mechanisms are around that. For those devices, please change the administrative logon and password. I can tell you how many times I'm able to go on and access a Comcast router or an AT&T router because the password and the admin name were not changed. And there's a list on the website that provides you every router password and logon for every manufacturer out there. So, you know, it makes it easy for the install, but please, if you haven't done it, change those default values. If you can install software firewalls on your computer systems that detect malicious ware, that's a good idea. And if necessary, use virtual private networks anytime you're connected to a Wi-Fi network. Secure your wireless and access points. Once again, change those administrative passwords. Turn off the service set identifier or the SSID from broadcasting. That's another way to make your network hidden. Make sure that your access point is using Wi-Fi protected access 2 with the advanced encryption standard. Please, if you're using wired equivalent privacy WEP, change that immediately. That was the very first wireless security protocol, and it can be cracked in a matter of minutes. If you're providing internet access to your customers, make sure that you separate them from your business network, so have a guest network for Wi-Fi. And also avoid connecting to unknown or unsecured guest wireless access points, even for performing non-business activities. That really is a trust factor, and it will keep you safe. I honestly recommend not connecting to a Starbucks or a free Wi-Fi hotspot just because there are no security protections put up on those. Set up web and email filters. They can help you remove a lot of the malware attachment and prevent your inbox from being cluttered with the undesirable spam email. You also want to, consider blocking your employees from going to websites that are frequently associated with cybersecurity threats. One of the more common ones being used now is Facebook, with malicious links in Facebook. So, you want to analyze what information as well as what other areas of access are really important to your business. If you have very sensitive information, you're going to want to use encryption for making your stored information unreadable to anyone that doesn't have the password or the key. For your computers, use full disk encryption, which encrypts all the information on your computers, your tablets, or your smartphones. Some come with it, some do not. You really have to look at all your mobile devices to determine if that's the case. If you send sensitive documents or emails, consider encrypting those documents and or emails before sending. That way it's just between you and the receiver that have the password or key to undo them. You can give them that key via the phone or, another method, but never send it in the same email as the encrypted document. You want to dispose of your computers safely. Some small businesses tend to sell, throw away, or donate, but when disposing them, they really need to be wiped, the hard drive. A lot of the operating systems provide the capability, and there's also third-party software that can do it as well. For your mobile phones, if you can install a remote wiping application, that way if your device is lost or stolen, you can wipe all the information on the device. Train your employees. This will ensure that they're knowing what to look for. You know, as we mentioned in the terminology, phishing is a big thing, and usually the easiest way to hack somebody is with a phishing attack. So if they know what to look for and how to maintain best practices, they'll really understand that. As we look at the respond function, this is where I said that the logging was really, really important. So you want to develop a plan for disasters and information security incidents and maintain those monitor logs. That way we have a trail that we're able to look at and detect so that we can respond and then ultimately get into recover mode. These log functions, I know a lot of us turn them off because they use space or we don't have them set up on our wireless devices, et cetera, but they really are an immediate way for providing a cybersecurity professional and or law enforcement a way of going after those activities. Logs really should be backed up and saved for at least a year, and in some types of information, depending on the type of business, really stored for a minimum of up to 6 years. This is very helpful when you're working with states that have notification laws that you have to require customers of what was stolen, disclosed, or otherwise lost. If you have those logs, we're able to see where that relevant information or what relevant information may have been lost. Also, if you're working with law enforcement, they're going to want to see that type of information, and so that you can provide it to them. You know, the local FBI offices do a lot of aspects of responding to cybersecurity break-ins. And then the recover function. This is making full backups of your important business and data information. This will let you restore it in case of a virus or a malicious program infecting, or even when an employee makes a mistake. You'll be able to recreate all that information and really have that integrity of that information back. You can put them on removable media, a USB hard drive, or an online using a cloud service provider. You know, just if you can, have those backups encrypted if you're going to do it on the cloud. And just do your due diligence when selecting the provider. If you use a hard drive, ensure it's large enough to hold all of your monthly backups for a year. It's helpful to create a separate folder for each of your computers when you connect to the external disk to your computer to make backups. And then you want to test them regularly. Test them immediately after generating to make sure that you can restore data that was necessary, but also conduct incremental or differential backups of the business systems so that you can try doing recoveries of only certain records. And then lastly, the one thing you may want to do in this new era is consider cyber insurance. It's similar to other types of insurance that you may use for your business, such as flood, fire, general liability, but it helps you to respond and recover from a security incident. A lot of times, cyber insurance companies will provide expertise and help you identify where you're vulnerable, what kinds of actions you may need to protect your systems, and they'll help you investigate an incident and report to appropriate authorities. As with any type of insurance, you know, do your due diligence. Again, determine your risks before purchasing the policy and research the companies. And then, you know, after all of that's done, this is a living, breathing thing, so always make improvements to the processes, procedures, and the technology so that you can ensure that you're staying on top of the threats as they come about. And the threats are changing every day, and this is just becoming a common practice of business. With that, I think we're right at the quarter mark, and I will turn it back over to Cameron for questions and answers.
Thanks. We do have a question or two. If anyone else has questions, please use the chat box to send those over to me so I can make sure to ask and get all the answers for you. Our first question is, what different recommendations, if any, do you make for all Mac business environments? For example, a lot of Mac users don't use antivirus or security software because OS X is already pretty secure out of the box.
Yeah, I wish that nomenclature would go away. Mac OS is one of the most hacked, vulnerable systems that are out there. And for that reason, because they made this proponent a while back, and it was true in the early 90s. As of today, it's not. There are security functions on Mac that can be turned on if you know how to go in and access the Mac OS firewall. I always recommend an antivirus on every system, Macintosh or not, iPhone, iPad, anything that is a Mac OS should have some sort of antivirus running on it or malware detection. There are ransomware for Mac now that is available, and that is being pushed out widely. We're seeing it more in the European countries right now, but I expect it to hit the United States sometime in 2017, where we're going to start seeing a lot of the Mac computers being encrypted and held at ransom for payment. And that's because of this perception that Macs are, normally secure. It's one of the farthest things from the truth, and if you just search Mac vulnerabilities in Google, you will see all the vulnerabilities that are out there. The other reason Macs are inherently targeted as well is they use third-party applications. If you're using Mac just as a Mac, and you're not using Adobe, Java, or any of the other Microsoft products, all of those products, those third-party softwares are vulnerable as well, making your Mac vulnerable. So it's always good to run either a Mac firewall system, an antivirus, and or, something to alert you that something malicious is going on with the Mac.
Thanks for that answer. Definitely very insightful. I know we use Macs over here, and I have a personal one. I never would have thought that they might not be as secure. Does anyone else have any questions? All right. Well, if not, just want to thank you for sharing this webinar with us today. It was definitely very insightful and provided a lot of useful information. We are having another cybersecurity webinar next Thursday, February 2nd, and that webinar is Cybersecurity 2.0. So Jay Kimo will go into a little bit more detail and go into some more advanced topics about cybersecurity. So if you're looking to jump in a little bit deeper, feel free to join us again next week.
Thank you for your time.